The 1904 Summer Olympics in St. Louis marked the first time the Olympic Games were held in the United States, but the marathon event at these Games remains one of the most chaotic and bizarre in Olympic history. It was a race full of oddities, including poor course design, dangerous conditions, and strange behaviors from the athletes themselves. Despite its disorganization, it left an indelible mark on the history of the Olympic Games. The marathon was scheduled to take place on August 30, 1904, on a grueling course that stretched 24.85 miles through the streets of St. Louis. The race was held under extreme heat, with temperatures soaring to around 90 degrees Fahrenheit, which was made even worse by the dusty, unpaved roads that runners had to navigate. The race took place in the afternoon, adding to the brutal conditions, as the athletes were forced to endure both exhaustion and a lack of proper hydration. The marathon was supposed to be a test of stamina and endurance, but it quickly became clear that this particular race was not only poorly planned, but also incredibly dangerous for the participants. The marathon course itself was far from ideal. It was full of dirt roads, sharp turns, and even railroad tracks that runners had to avoid. The course had little in the way of proper infrastructure, and there were very few water stations along the way, adding to the difficulty. This lack of proper planning would become a significant factor in the outcome of the race. The event began with 32 runners, but only 14 of them managed to finish the race. Among the many oddities of the marathon, one of the most bizarre moments involved the winner of the race, Fred Lors. Lors had been running well, but after feeling exhausted, he decided to take a car for part of the course. He was driven for several miles and then rejoined the race to finish the final stretch and cross the finish line in first place. However, it was quickly discovered that he had cheated. Lors was disqualified and his victory was invalidated. Incredibly, Lors later joked that he had only taken the car ride to rest his legs, but his actions were far from humorous at the time. The eventual winner of the marathon was Thomas Hicks, but his victory was no less strange. Hicks was severely dehydrated, suffering from exhaustion and hallucinations. His trainers gave him doses of strychnine, an alkaloid that in small amounts acts as a stimulant, as well as brandy to keep him going. Hicks, barely able to stand, continued to stagger toward the finish line, often needing assistance. His victory was not one of triumph, but of survival. After crossing the finish line, Hicks collapsed and was immediately treated for the effects of strychnine poisoning. The fact that an athlete could be drugged and still manage to win such a prestigious race speaks to the madness of the event. The conditions and management of the 1904 marathon were so poor that the race was labeled as one of the most bizarre marathons in history. The lack of oversight, proper training, and regard for the safety of the athletes made the event more of a spectacle than a legitimate competition. Despite the bizarre circumstances, the race was part of the first Olympic Games held in the United States, and is still discussed as an example of what not to do in organizing sporting events. In conclusion, the 1904 Olympic Marathon in St. Louis remains a dark chapter in Olympic history, filled with strange decisions, dangerous conditions, and controversial actions by the athletes themselves. While the race did have a winner, Thomas Hicks, his victory was one of survival rather than triumph, reflecting the chaotic and poorly planned nature of the event. The marathon was a reminder that the early days of the modern Olympics were far from the well-organized and professionally managed competitions we are familiar with today. Like, share, subscribe, and press the bell icon.